Hi, this is my ethical, legal and health and safety issues in sports and exercise science research. You may ask, what does ethical, legal and health and safety mean? Well, ethical is the dealing with the moral principles, which are general beliefs about what is right and wrong in life. And so in research, you would be dealing with what is right and wrong in conduct. And this is something you must consider depending on the group of people that you are working with. So for example, if you're a researcher working with a group of kids, then it would be completely wrong to swear or say any inappropriate language in front of them. Whereas if you're with adults, maybe you might make a joke and you might use some inappropriate language, which might be more appropriate depending on the group of people. Legal is what you must do, as this is the law made by the government, and so not abiding by the legal issues could result in incarceration or a fine, and you're definitely likely to be stripped of any kind of accreditation you might have. Health and safety refers to the regulations and procedures used to prevent accident or injury. And in 1974 there was a Health and Safety Act which states that it is the duty of the employer to ensure well-being of employees is kept intact. So for research it would be the same obviously, but for the duty of the researcher to ensure that the well-being of all participants is kept intact. So we're now going to look at a brief historical context of ethical, legal and health and safety issues in experimentation. So the main reason we have new regulations and laws is it started in Nazi Germany because they had very terrible ethical issues and poor human experimentation, which was in Auschwitz. They had bone and muscle and nerve transplantation, gas experiments and malaria experiments, which now would all be illegal, unethical, and none of them would be would abide by health and safety laws either. This led to the Declaration of Helsinki, which was in 1947, because before this there was no code of conduct for human experimentation, which was why Hitler in Nazi Germany was allowed to do these experiments. So the Declaration of Helsinki was put in place to prevent the tragedy that occurred in Nazi Germany ever happening again. It was developed by the World Medical Association, and it includes the Nuremberg Code, which has 10 factors you must abide by in human experimentation, which you can see on the slide just under Nuremberg. If you want to pause the video, you can read through them. So now we go to BASES, which is the British Association for Sports and Exercise Science, and what these basically do is they give ethical and legal procedures that researchers must follow. As well as this, they give professional development of sports scientists in order to give them accreditations and certificates so that they can demonstrate that they possess the knowledge and skills to practice safely and effectively. We will now go on to scenario 1, which is on the slide right here, and you can pause the video now to read through it. Now I'm going to be evaluating the first scenario. So firstly, the researcher created a generic consent form that the parents had to sign, allowing the children to go on the trip, which is actually law, and if you don't do this and you still conduct this research, then you could be sent to court or fined. But this was the only good practice that this researcher used during their experiment. So the poor practice was that the children were not informed that they had to wear swimwear until they arrived, and so there was no informed consent basically of what they were going to do and what they had to wear, etc. As well as this, children were pressured into doing it even if they were reluctant. and all individuals should be volunteers, and they should have the right to withdraw if they wish to. To correct this, the researchers should make a informed consent, which is a lot more detailed than it was, and state that they have to wear a swimsuit, state that they can withdraw if they wish to. As well as this, the researcher must abide by the Data Protection Act in 1998, which states that all data must be confidential unless given consent from the participant, and the researcher put up all of the data on the whiteboard so that the whole class or the whole group could see it, and this may have made some of the participants feel embarrassed or self-conscious about the results, and so he should make sure that all of the participants are okay with this before doing so. As well as this, the participants have the right to withdraw, so he should not have pressured any of the participants into wearing their swimsuit, or even just participating in general if they really didn't want to. Also, they should ensure that the participants have volunteered, which they clearly didn't, as many of them were reluctant to this. And in experimentation, all participants must be volunteers. The consequences to the participant of this is that they may have felt psychological harm rather, because they were reluctant to wear their swimsuits, and so they may have felt self-conscious, and they may have felt embarrassed when they were wearing their swimsuits, which may have made them even more self-conscious than they were before. And the consequence to the researcher is that they may have to go through some training of ethical issues, and so that they have better knowledge for next time. And they may be warned about losing their BASES accreditation, or they may be suspended for a certain amount of time. Now we move to scenario 2, which is here. You may pause the video to read through this. In scenario 2, I couldn't see any good practice here, and so we'll start off with poor practice. The researcher did not allow the participant to withdraw from activity after feeling discomfort. There was slight sexism in the research, and there was a lack of medical equipment and knowledge of medical procedures. The researcher published the data to a university without disclosing the information to participants and getting their consent. And he reduced the warm-up in order to save time. So to correct this, the participants should be able to withdraw from any activity if they believe it is necessary, and one of the participants felt discomfort, and so the researcher should have allowed them to stop. They should also ensure that the whole representation of the class is shown, not just, as he stated, the better boys, which is also sexist, which is not great at all. He must also ensure the correct medical equipment is available in case of any injury, like what did happen, and have an accurate risk assessment prepared so that he knows what to do in case of the injury or emergency. As well as this, he should ensure the participants are happy to have their data published, which abides by the Data Protection Act, and use positive language rather than abusive language when talking to the participants, as he spoke to the child that felt discomfort with abusively, and so he may have felt psychological harm here, as the instructor gave him abusive language, and so this may have made him feel really self-conscious. Another consequence to the participant is that they may have had serious physical harm when falling and had no major medical attention afterwards, so they would not have known until later on if there was serious physical harm, because no medical procedures were used. and also there was an increased risk of injury for all of the other participants after he reduced the warm-up. The consequences to the researcher are that he could potentially be sued for publishing data without any permission, so he would have had to pay off money, and their basis of accreditation could be removed from him due to the lack of health and safety procedure and inappropriate comments, because the basis of accreditation states that you can demonstrate that you have the knowledge and skills to practice safely and effectively, which clearly is not the case here. Also, the child's parents could press charges if the injury was severe enough, as the researcher did not follow any procedure, so the researcher could become incarcerated or fined, potentially, as well as their basis accreditation being taken or suspended. Now we go to scenario 3. And so yeah, pause the video here to read through this. Scenario 3 had a lot more good practice than the first two scenarios, as there was an informed consent stating what they were going to be doing, and he used positive language when the participants finished the test and gave them a high five, which was appropriate as they're young children. As well as this, he ensured that they performed a cool down before leaving, which reduced the risk of injury afterwards. But he also had some poor practice. For example, the researcher made the child eat the food even when they didn't want to, and he made the child participate despite feeling ill, and just said that they would run it off, and that he wasn't actually ill, basically suggesting that. As well as this, there was no adult supervising the test while the researcher was helping the sick child. So to correct this, they could have they need to make sure that the participants had the right to withdraw, and so the child shouldn't have eaten the food after they stated that it tasted funny and that they didn't like it. They should not be forced to eat this. This could cause them psychological harm, or maybe even physiological, because they could have been allergic to the food, or the food could have been undercooked. As well as this, the participants should all be volunteers, and one child was forced to participate even after feeling ill, so there clearly was not a volunteer. As finally, they should ensure there is another adult on site in case of an incident like what did happen when the child was sick. So consequences to the participant are that the child became sick, which could have been because the food was uncooked, and therefore there could have been psychological and physiological harm caused to them. Psychological harm could have been caused because the researcher just basically said that they weren't ill and basically told them that they were lying. And this physiological harm was apparent when they were sick. As well as this, other participants could have been injured, and no trained supervisor would have been able to help, because the researcher was actually helping the child that was sick, and he left someone who was between 12 and 16 to watch the rest of the class. The consequences to the researcher are that they could be fined or even sentenced, as he forced the child to eat food which was potentially uncooked, or the child may have even been allergic and had an allergic reaction to it. And the researcher may be untrusted in the future, and so may struggle to conduct research or find any participants that are willing to participate in the research.